My name is Vicki Luther, and I'll be the service associate this morning at yet another virtual service of our Unitarian Universalist Church of the Hill Country. We're pleased to see everyone on this foggy morning, and also we gather in hopes of mild and pleasant weather so that soon we can meet outside face to face. Any guests or visitors this morning?
I noticed Elaine has joined us. Welcome, Elaine. Elaine is my friend and neighbor.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome,
Probably
Elaine.
wants them on video.
Yes, and we also have Kathleen, who's joined us, who recently found us on Facebook, and she's joined us as well. Her camera's turned off, but we're glad to have you here.
Welcome, both Elaine and Kathleen. Thank you. Our opening words this morning will be offered by one of our members, Jill Wiggins, who later in the service will also be sharing her thoughts on her personal journey to a theology. Jill?
This is from Friedrich Nietzsche, and I will reassure you that it's not going to be gloomy German philosophers all the way down, but there is a little bit of German philosophy in here. This is from Daybreak, Thoughts on the Prejudices of Morality. Christianity has declared even doubt to be sin. One is supposed to be cast into belief without reason by a miracle, and from then on to swim in it as in the brightest and least ambiguous of elements. Even a glance towards land, even the thought that one perhaps exists for something else as well as swimming, even the slightest impulse of our amphibious nature is sin. What is wanted are blindness and intoxication and an eternal song over the waves in which reason has drowned.
Thank you, Jill. This Pisces is always happy for water references. If there are any announcements this morning, you can use the chat function on our Zoom screens or wave at Justin if you'd like to share or speak. Any announcements? All right then. Now's the time for our chalice lighting. If Justin will arrange that screen. Our chalice lighting is a symbol of our shared space and thoughts. Day breaks on our gratitude for family and friends, for the freedom to find our own truths, for the company of those who gather here, and the promise we offer to one another. Let the light of day bring love and grace into our lives. At this point, I'll ask you to join with me in sharing our mission statement and affirmation, which will be posted on our screen. Our mission statement: we journey together, guided by UU values, to seek, to nurture, and serve our loving church family, our community, and our world. And our affirmation: the doctrine of this church is love. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. And this is our great covenant: to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship as we strive to have all souls grow into harmony with the divine. Our hymn this morning is The Spirit of Life.
Are we ready for the reading?
Yeah, just a minute.
Oh, was anybody else?
Okay, Justin, back to me.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, we'll now have a reading, and it's called The Essence of Christianity by Ludwig Feuerbach and shared by Jill Wiggins.
In 1841, German philosopher and historian Ludwig Feuerbach wrote in The Essence of Christianity that we make the God we need, projecting onto this creation our deepest anxieties and desires. Feuerbach, a humanist who strongly influenced Karl Marx, goes on: religion is nothing more than a consciousness of the infinite, that God is merely the outward projection of man's inward nature. Different aspects of God correspond to different needs in human nature.
Thank you, Jill. And this is the point at our service in which I have to remind you to please continue the financial support of our church. If you haven't made a pledge for 2021 or started fulfilling that pledge, please contact Mike Burkett. And of course, contributions can be mailed to the church. Our second hymn this morning will be All Creatures of the Earth and Sky. I'm pleased to introduce our member, Jill Wiggins, to share with us a sermon of her own making, Angels with Forklifts, a 50-year journey to a personal theology. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Vicki. On a misty February morning about 3 years ago, walking the labyrinth at UUCHC, hoping, as one often does in a labyrinth, to have some sort of mystical revelation, I decided that such experiences were probably conjurings of the mind, or to quote Voltaire, if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. Excuse me. But as I rounded the path of the labyrinth, I did begin to sense another presence, which I interpreted as a spirit guide. Eureka! Here was my epiphany. After completing the labyrinth, I ran through the mist most of the way back to the meeting house in tears. I didn't share my experience with anyone until at another retreat, I told a chaplain whom I knew well and trusted. I tried to visualize this spirit guide. I named her Ani, feminized from one of my favorite gods, the Egyptian Canaanite god, Anubis. After returning home over time, I found it harder and harder to summon Ani, and I decided she needed to stay at UUCHC. I even tried to create a visual of her with drawings of various exotic goddess figures. How did I get from my basic Protestant upbringing to a probably imagined goddess figure? I was christened in our local Church of England, St. Mary's in Newmarket, Suffolk, England, on my first birthday. When we moved to the US, I don't think my parents knew we were supposed to be Episcopalian, and the local Presbyterian church in Norwalk, Ohio, where we settled, had helped sponsor us. My parents seemed okay with any basic Protestant church. In fact, after I grew up, they moved to the Cleveland area and attended a Methodist church, as my mother did when she moved to Florida after my father died. My brother, married to a Catholic, remained unchurched. His memorial service was officiated by a Methodist minister who happened to be a family friend. His wife teaches or his widow now, teaches at a Catholic college. And when the nuns were praying for him when he was dying, he said that was fine with him. He was happy about that. Only my sister remains an Episcopalian. We all sang in the choir at First Presbyterian, and I was active in Westminster Fellowship and helped out at Vacation Bible School in the summers. I was confirmed, and I still have my King James Bible given to me for confirmation. I took that Christian business pretty seriously. When my niece was born on December 25th, 1961, I was thrilled for her to have been born on Jesus's birthday. But upon going away to college, I drifted away and eventually lost my Christian faith entirely. For the next 20 years, I had no faith, no church, and I married a man who had been raised Catholic and would not darken the door of any church ever again. Our children received no religious upbringing. They did turn out okay anyway. Around age 30, I began to realize there was this Unitarian Universalism, a place to have a faith community without having to say creeds or believe in bread and wine representing body and blood. Living in the Virginia suburbs of Washington at the time, I had no nearby UU church, so I tried Arlington Unitarian. It was a bit too far away, and of course I had to go alone. The only phone call I received after attending a couple of times was one asking for money. Needless to say, I didn't go back. A UU community nearer to my home, Accotink, was forming right around the time we left Virginia and moved to Austin. If we had stayed, I would have jumped right in. That was about 38 years ago. I had promised myself that when we moved, I would attend a UU church no matter what. At that time, there was only First UU in North Central Austin, and naturally, we lived in far Southwest before MOPAC was extended that far south. I went anyway. My first Sunday there, I met the music director during coffee hour, and she was very welcoming and insisted I come to the next choir practice, which I did for the next 30-some years. After she retired, I served on the search committee that selected Brent Baldwin as music director, and he's still there more than 20 years later. I also participated in committee work, served on the board, and in 2010 on the search committee that chose Meg Barnhouse as a settled minister. Meg, something of a UU superstar, is still senior minister at First UU Austin. The search process with 8 other UUs, all of us with different skills, personalities, and opinions, was one of the most rewarding work experience I have ever had. Excuse me. The community at First UU Austin helped me through a divorce in 1987. And when Gary and I met in 1994, he began attending with me and became very active in the church and in the theater community affiliated with the church, Paradox Players, ultimately becoming creative director, producing, directing, and performing in a number of plays. We also co-chaired the membership committee for a couple of years. During these years and in my time here at UUCHC, I have tried to develop a personal theology, but like many UUs, it's been a bit of a rocky road. After finding and losing Ani, I continued my quest. This past spring, early in the pandemic, I read John Shelby Spong's Jesus for the Non-Religious. After a curbside pickup of art supplies at Hometown Crafts, when my granddaughter said, "Those ladies are doing God's work," she asked me if I was an atheist. I told her I was an agnostic. I don't know whether there is a God. That night, multiple factors caused my dark night of the soul, and I got up and wrote this quote from my journal. So, the nature of God. I believe what we call God is the enormous intelligence that made the universe, this one, maybe others, and set its laws, connects everything, and allows and makes all the good, bad, beautiful, and terrible. Neither benevolent nor cruel, this force makes everything run by these universal laws. Humans are tiny, microscopic or less organisms trying to understand and live within that indecipherable, seemingly chaotic universe. But it's not, it abides by its own laws, while being connected by love and divided by fear, unquote. After Spong's book showed me the humanity of Jesus as a path to the divine, I wrote, quote, but that begs the question, what if you don't recognize the divine? If the universe is a force, all powerful, all knowing, all connected, but also uncaring, a neutral force that neither loves nor hates, but just is, what then? If God is a human invention to stave off our terrible fear of mortality, isn't it likely that love is also a human invention, an antidote to the fear and hatred that fear engenders toward those not of our tribe? I think so. The universe is the force, the power. Love is humanity's way of coping with that force, unquote. As the pandemic progressed, along with serious family challenges, I faced another sleepless night with too many fears and worries to calm my mind. I decided to try to turn it over to the universe. And I got a reply. It was, honey, this is all yours. I could just see her, the feminine personification of God as a big, beautiful Black woman. So, according to the goddess of the universe, I was out of luck. Next time I saw my therapist, I told her about this. She said, ask if you could just upload everything for the night and take it back in the morning. Strange, self-deluding as it sounds, it worked. Sometimes it was a file folder or an envelope of worries. Sometimes it was a steamer trunk with lots of bags and packages in between. I'd send them up and the angels would store them and return them in the morning. I visualized an infinite celestial warehouse. Imagine an Amazon fulfillment center with shelves and shelves, with angels using forklifts to put away the heavy crates and trunks of a troubled humanity. I know it's silly. I knew it was silly as I did it, but it worked. I could sleep and face the challenges again in the light of day, hauling those troubles back down to work on easing some of them. Later, I discovered another angel, a gentle giant, who picked me up and put me on a boat floating down a calm river to a beautiful spa where I could rest and be pampered. During this process, I happened upon an article about Stanford anthropologist T.M. Lerman's book, How God Becomes Real, in which she studies American evangelism as well as spiritual practices across other forms of religious devotion, such as charismatic Christian worship in Ghana and India, Santeria, and even British witchcraft. In her book, Lerman examines how worshipers open themselves to their experiences of God, how they communicate with gods and spirits, and in turn, hear those gods and spirits reply to them. She says, rather than presuming that people worship because they believe, we ask instead whether people believe because they worship. Reading this helped me to understand my relationship to my personal goddess, whom I've named Adelia, which is a mashup of my two grandmothers' names. She became real because I believed. I believed because I needed to believe. I cannot help but think my experience is universal, or at least common. To be human is to suffer, to experience joy and pain in equal amounts, and to need a space, an entity, to share the weight of those burdens. The past year has been one of the most challenging of my life, as it probably has been for most of you. It has been a struggle to find the positive, the good, and the joyful, and sometimes I fail. But we are fortunate we have so far avoided the virus. We have a safe home and the resources to meet our basic needs. For that, I am grateful, whether to the universe, a being we could call God, or just dumb luck. As the doxology says, praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above, ye heavenly host. Let's give the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen.
Thank you, Jill. Now's our opportunity for congregational comment, and I'll begin by thanking Jill for sharing, and in such a delightful way. You made me think and smile at the same time. Thank you. Other
Great
comments? Thank you. Just wave at Justin if you have a comment, please.
All right, Mike, let me get you up there.
I just want to echo Vicky. Thank you very much, Jill. That was well done. It was concise and precise, and but still contains things for me to think about. I enjoyed that very much. Thank you.
Right. It was fun to do. I enjoyed it.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Vicky.
I just want to share, mostly with Jill, but others as well, that the divine feminine is what's operative in my own personal theology. My road has been quite different from yours, but one thing I really learned from a friend here in Texas in conversation once, who she was also raised Catholic, as was I, and she's Latinx, and she was telling me that she still has a statue of the Our Lady of Guadalupe in her house. And I said, well, you know, you're not a Catholic anymore. Why do you have that? And she said, well, because I believe in, and then she mentioned a Chinese goddess and I don't know, two others that were all female goddesses from other religions. And she said, you know, it's all Mother Nature, it's all one. And I said, well, how do you do that? How do you let yourself pick and choose? And she said to me, why can't you pick and choose? And that simple question just rocked my world. And even though I've been a Unitarian Universalist for, over 40 years, it suddenly occurred to me that we can pick and choose. And anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Vicki, have you read When God Was a Woman or The Chalice and the Blade?
I've
Those are both.
Yeah, I've read The Chalice and the Blade after that because I will read How God Becomes Real. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I'm asked the library to order it, and I still haven't gotten it. Another one that's really good is The Alphabet versus the Goddess.
The Alphabet versus the Goddess.
The Alphabet versus the Goddess. Fascinating stuff. I love this stuff.
Thank you.
And I like that idea that you can pick and choose.
Yeah, it just stunned me because I think getting a classical education and then being raised in an extremely Catholic family and a very European family, it just never occurred to me. To me, it was either or, all or nothing. I don't know. It's very empowering to realize I can do this. I can pick and choose. I think
Carolyn, you look like you're poised to speak.
I don't pick and choose. I have them all here in my house. I have the Virgin of Guadalupe. I have various other virgins. I have the Venuses of Lemendorf or whatever, the Maltese Venus from the pagan years, because I like them because they look like me. They're very Rubenesque. And I have them all. The Chinese one, I have them all. And I worship them all. But now I thank you, Jill, because now I'm going to create my own personal goddess. And I'm just running through names in my head. Thank you.
You need to go to UMRU. Maybe you'll find one there.
I go there a lot, actually.
Sorry about that.
Okay, Brian's got his hand up.
I appreciate your mentioning Bishop Spong, and I've gotten introduced to his stuff through my dad, who was a minister, and he truly enjoyed the insight and the humanity that Bishop Spong brought to theology. The other thing, I enjoyed the image of the warehouse of human concern. And I kind of pictured the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where they have top angels working on it.
I want to know if they've got wings while they're driving the forklifts, and don't they get in the way?
All right, and Kevin, let me get you on here.
Yeah, I'm intrigued about the picking and choosing idea, and I really enjoyed the sermon too. But when I think about my own journey, it seems like I've been picked more than picked. That I have been picked more than pick or choose. When let's see, it was 45 years ago, I went to the First Unitarian Church in Memphis with no idea of finding a religious community at all. I went to so that I could look at the river in a comfortable chair. And within about 10 minutes, I felt this is it. This is where I need to be, without any previous feeling of need for that, which surprised me. And so here I am 45 years later, still feeling the same thing. But not that I picked it, but that it picked me. I'll have to think about that a while. I don't, if I have a concept of a higher power, it to this point at least is without any gender. It's I don't know what kind of a name I would give it. Because it's an it, not a he or a she at this point. I'll be thinking about this. And thank you. It was very thought provoking. Jill. Thank you.
And David.
Well, I'm after I was raised in both in New England Methodist and Congregational, and sang in the choir and did all that, and then was unchurched for 50 years, and more than 50 years, until Stephanie and I walked into the UU Church of the Hill Country a year ago, September, and immediately went to see if we might find some like-minded people that we could sort of establish friendships with, and absolutely certainly felt that, but also felt that I belonged, that it was all very natural. So I'm early in a kind of, and so having studied religion and thought about religion, but not really thought about it as applying to me for years, I'm now just, I bought a new and better copy of the King James Version of the Bible, and have been reading it and reading commentaries, etc. But I just wanted to share, all the time that I was unchurched, I found a line, believe it or not, from Karl Marx to be very beautiful. Everybody knows the end of this sentence, because it ends, religion is the opiate of the people. But the sentence starts like this: religion is the cry of the oppressed creature, the soul of a soulless age. Beautiful thoughts. To me, the whole time that I was unchurched, I sure thought that was true. And certainly we live in a pretty darn soulless age. And therefore religion, I'm finally coming to see, is very important.
Okay, Vicki, go ahead.
We'll draw this to a close, and because I'm a service associate, I'll take the opportunity to close this part of our service by saying, only in a Unitarian Universalist service would you have two German theologians, Karl Marx, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and an Amazon fulfillment center mentioned. I think that sums up what
I'd like to add,
yes, go
Vicki,
ahead.
I visualize these angels as sort of more like nuns, with the flying nuns.
I think it's an image that will stay with many of us, and I'll echo again everyone else's thank you, Jill, for what of yourself you put into this. We really appreciate it. Justin, we'll go ahead and extinguish our chalice at this point. As our chalice is extinguished, let us know again that the earth is our home and that we have too often abused it. Let us in quietness consider how we might be part of making it more healthful for all living things. Knowing that each of us has some sorrow or anxiety hidden within, let us consider in quietness how we may reach out to one another with our smiles and encouraging words. Let us share joy and gratitude. Thank you.
Our closing words are from the great 20th century American philosopher, George Carlin. Tell people there's an invisible man in the sky who created the universe, and the vast majority will believe you. Tell them the paint is wet and they have to touch it to be sure.
That closes our service, and I think Justin will continue to keep unmuting folks if you wave at him and want conversation. Thank you all.